Batman Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 15, Logger. Earth 1, Saga 1, Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 3. Gotham had become quieter, not safer, just quieter. Batman stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, watching the snow fall between the buildings. Christmas was getting closer. The calendar killer was still out there. Black Mask was still out there. Deadshot was still somewhere in Gotham. And now Batman had another problem. His own body. Batman looked down at his gloves. He remembered his last encounter with the electrocutioner, Lester Buczynski, a man who had turned electricity into a weapon. The last time Batman fought him, the electrical current nearly stopped his heart. That couldn't happen again. Batman activated a small compartment on his glove. A series of tiny electrical contacts appeared along the palm. He tested the setting. A brief pulse traveled through the glove. Batman looked at it. Emergency defibrillator. He adjusted the setting. The glove could deliver a controlled electrical shock. Not enough to hurt him under normal circumstances. Enough to restart his heart if necessary. He stared at the device. Electrocutioner almost killed me. I can't keep assuming I'll always have time to recover. He closed his hand. Every opponent teaches me something. Firefly taught me to expect fire. Copperhead taught me to expect poison. KG Beast taught me what happens when I'm outmatched. Electrocutioner taught me that my own body can become the battlefield. Batman looked over Gotham. If I'm going to survive this city, I have to adapt. He jumped from the rooftop. Antonio Diego was running. He had been running for 3 blocks. He didn't know why Batman was chasing him. Actually, he did. He had been working for Black Mask. That was enough. Antonio turned into an alley. Batman landed behind him. Antonio froze. Don't. Batman stepped forward. Antonio reached for his gun. Batman moved first. He knocked the weapon away. Antonio swung. Batman blocked. The enforcer tried another punch. Batman ducked. He drove his shoulder into Antonio's chest and slammed him against the brick wall. Antonio gasped. Batman grabbed his jacket. Where is Roman Sionis? Antonio said nothing. Batman tightened his grip. Where's Black Mask? Go to hell. Batman slammed him against the wall again. Antonio winced. You work for him. I don't know anything. Batman studied him. He's scared. Not of me, of Sionis. Antonio swallowed. Batman leaned closer. You're gonna tell me. Antonio finally cracked. The bank. Batman paused. What bank? The Gotham Merchants Bank. Batman released him slightly. Why? Roman owns it. Batman stared at him. Of course. Black Mask doesn't just hide behind criminals. He hides behind legitimate businesses. Antonio continued. He's supposed to be there. When? I don't know. Batman grabbed him again. Who else knows? Antonio shook his head. Nobody. Batman searched him. Then he found a key card. Gotham Merchants Bank. Batman looked at it. You're coming with me. Antonio looked confused. What? Batman struck him in the neck. Antonio collapsed. Batman caught him before he hit the ground. He lowered him carefully. Then he contacted the police anonymously. Anonymous tip, Batman said into the communicator. Possible Black Mask associate. Coordinates transmitted. He disappeared. Batman was halfway to Gotham Merchants Bank when his police scanner picked up another call. Body discovered. Batman stopped. He listened. Deadshot. Again. Batman changed direction. Black Mask can wait. Deadshot can't. Batman fired his grapnel. The body was lying in the snow. Batman landed on a nearby rooftop. He waited until the police left. Then he descended. He activated detective mode.
Oh my god.
Appeared in blue. 1 gunshot. Perfect placement. Batman crouched. Deadshot. He scanned the victim. No identification, no weapon, no witnesses. But then Batman noticed something. Paint. Tiny traces of paint on the victim's clothing. Batman scanned it. His computer processed the sample. Rare industrial paint. Batman narrowed his eyes. That's old. He examined the snow. A faint trail. Batman Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 15, The Painted Man, Earth 1, Saga 1, Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 3. Gotham was freezing. Snow covered the streets, the rooftops, the gargoyles, and the endless rows of buildings that made up the city. Christmas was getting closer. 2 weeks ago, Gotham had been preparing for the holidays. Now people were locking their doors, checking their windows, watching every stranger who walked past them, because somewhere in the city, someone was turning holidays into murder scenes. And Batman was running out of time. Batman stood on a rooftop overlooking Gotham. His cape moved in the wind. His eyes followed the traffic below. The city was quiet, too quiet. His cryptographic sequencer crackled. Batman reached toward his belt. Gotham police. He listened. Possible disturbance near the East End. Batman shut off the radio. Not enough information. Then another transmission came through. Male suspect, armed. Batman looked toward the direction of the call. That's closer. He fired his grapnel. The line caught. Batman swung across the street. As he moved through the darkness, his mind went somewhere else. Electrocutioner. Lester Bushinsky. Batman remembered the last time they had fought. The electricity, the suit, the pain. Lester's attacks had been reckless, powerful, but predictable. Batman had eventually defeated him, and Lester had gone to prison. He hadn't expected to see him again. He never did. Lester died behind bars, but his death had taught Batman something. Electricity could incapacitate him. It could stop his heart. And if that happened, he needed a way back. Batman looked at his gloves. He had modified them. A small setting hidden beneath the armor. He touched it. A faint electrical pulse traveled across the glove. Emergency defibrillator. He looked ahead. Hopefully I never need it. He paused. Hopefully. Then he landed. A group of Black Mask's men were moving through an alley. Batman dropped behind them. One turned. What? Batman grabbed him. Slam. The thug hit the pavement. Another swung. Batman ducked. He drove an elbow into the man's stomach. Another man pulled a knife. Batman caught his wrist. Twisted. The knife fell. Batman kicked it away. The last man ran. Batman fired his grapnel. The cable wrapped around the man's ankle. Batman pulled. The man hit the ground. Batman walked toward him. You're going to tell me where Roman Sionis is? The man shook his head. I don't know. Batman grabbed his jacket. You work for him. That doesn't mean I know where he is. Batman looked at him. You're right. The thug looked confused. Batman continued. But you know someone who does. The man's face changed. Batman noticed. There. Fear. Antonio. Batman said the name. The thug froze. Antonio Diego. Batman pulled him closer. Where? The thug swallowed. Gotham Merchants Bank. Batman released him. Thank you. The thug looked confused. Wait. Batman was already gone. Antonio Diego wasn't difficult to find. He was a Spanish enforcer who had worked for Black Mask for years. Batman found him outside a warehouse. Antonio was surrounded by men. Batman landed in the middle of them. The first man swung a pipe. Batman blocked it. He grabbed the pipe, pulled. The man stumbled forward. Batman drove his shoulder into him. Another attacked from behind. Batman spun. His cape struck the man's face. The man staggered. Batman kicked him into a stack of crates. Antonio pulled a handgun. Batman threw a batarang. The weapon flew from Antonio's hand. Antonio looked at Batman. You're him. Batman stepped forward. That's usually how this works. Antonio pulled a knife. Batman sighed. Don't. Antonio charged. Batman sidestepped. Antonio stumbled. Batman grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. Antonio cried out. Batman forced him against the wall. Where's Black Mask? I don't know. Batman tightened his grip. Antonio winced. Okay. Batman released him slightly. Gotham Merchants Bank. Roman owns the bank. I know. He's meeting someone there. Who? I don't know. Batman stared at him. Batman Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 15. Lugger. Earth 1, Saga 1, Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 3. The Batcave was quiet. Bruce sat at the workbench with his cowl sitting beside him. In front of him was one of his gloves. He had been staring at it for nearly 20 minutes. The memory kept coming back. Electrocutioner. Lester Bushinsky. The electricity. The way his body had reacted when Lester had attacked him. Bruce slowly turned the glove over. I got lucky. Alfred stood behind him. That is one way of describing it, sir. Bruce looked at him. The first time I fought him, I wasn't prepared for the voltage. You weren't prepared for many things the first time you began doing this. Bruce gave him a tired look. Thanks. Alfred smiled slightly. Bruce turned back to the glove. I've been thinking about what happened to me. You nearly died. Exactly. He picked up a small screwdriver. I can't always count on someone else being around. Alfred's Bruce? I know. Bruce opened the glove. I know what you're going to say, and yet you're doing it anyway. Yeah. Bruce began modifying the circuitry. I want a setting that can send a controlled electrical pulse. Alfred looked at the glove. For what purpose? Two purposes. Bruce pointed toward the circuitry, defibrillation. Then he pointed toward another section, an electrical discharge. Alfred frowned. You're essentially turning your gloves into portable defibrillators. If someone's heart stops, I might be able to restart it. And the second function? Bruce looked at him. If someone gets too close. Alfred sighed. Of course. Bruce continued working. The circuitry was crude. It wasn't perfect. Nothing in the cave was perfect yet. Everything was still being built. Everything was still being tested. Batman was still learning. Bruce connected the final wire. Let's see. He placed the glove on the testing apparatus. The machine beeped. A small electrical pulse traveled through the glove. Bruce nodded. Good. Alfred looked at him. And if it fails? Bruce put the glove on. Then I'll learn from it. Alfred shook his head. That seems to be your answer to everything. Bruce looked at the cave entrance. Because it's true. The police scanner suddenly crackled. Bruce's eyes moved toward it. A name? Antonio Diego. Bruce stood. Looks like I've got something. Alfred looked at the clock. Another long night. Bruce pulled his cowl over his head. Probably. He walked toward the elevator. Alfred watched him go. Master Bruce. Batman stopped. Yes? Be careful. Bruce looked back. I will. The elevator descended. The Batcave disappeared behind him. Antonio Diego had made a mistake. He had assumed Gotham's criminals were afraid of Batman. They weren't. Not yet. Some of them were curious. Some thought he was a myth. Some thought he was just another man in a costume. Antonio Diego belonged to the third group. He was an enforcer for Black Mask, a Spanish criminal who had worked his way through Roman Sionis' organization by doing the things other men were too afraid to do. He was strong, he was experienced, and he had information. Batman found him outside a warehouse in the East End. Antonio was talking to two men. Batman dropped from the roof. The two men barely had time to turn around. The first swung. Batman ducked. His fist drove into the man's stomach. The second reached for a gun. Batman threw a batarang. The weapon struck the man's wrist. The gun hit the pavement. Antonio turned. He pulled a knife. Batman stepped toward him. Antonio swung. Batman blocked. The knife scraped across the armor. Bruce grabbed his wrist. You're gonna tell me where Black Mask is? Antonio laughed. You think I'm afraid of you? No. Batman twisted his arm. Antonio dropped the knife. I think you're afraid of him. Antonio's smile disappeared. Batman slammed him against the wall. Where is Sionis? Go to hell. Batman tightened his grip. That's not an answer. Antonio headbutted him. Batman staggered. Antonio tried to run. Batman grabbed the back of his coat and pulled him backward. Antonio hit the ground. Batman crouched over him. Last chance. Antonio spat blood. You don't understand. I understand plenty. Roman Sionis doesn't trust anyone. Neither do I. Antonio stared at him. Batman leaned closer. You know what happens when people like you work for men like Sionis? Antonio didn't answer. You become disposable. Antonio's breathing changed. Bruce noticed. He's scared. Not of me, of Roman. Batman lowered his voice. You're going to tell me. Antonio finally spoke. The bank. Batman waited. The Gotham Merchants Bank. Why? Roman owns it. Batman narrowed his eyes. He's going to be there? Most likely. Most likely isn't good enough. Antonio swallowed. He has business there tonight. Batman stared at him. What kind of business? I don't know. Batman stood. You're going to tell the police everything you just told me. Antonio laughed. They won't believe me. They'll believe the evidence. Batman turned away. Antonio called after him. Batman. Batman stopped. You don't know what you're getting into. Batman looked over his shoulder. I've been hearing that a lot lately. Then he disappeared into the darkness. The body was lying in the snow. Batman stood several feet away from it. Another Deadshot victim. He crouched. The cold air entered his lungs. One thing about Gotham in December, the snow covered everything. Footprints, blood, evidence. But sometimes it preserved things too. Batman activated detective mode. The world changed. The victim's body highlighted. Trajectory, impact, blood spatter, a single bullet. Bruce studied the wound. Same caliber. He scanned the surrounding area. No shell casing. He stood. Deadshot took it with him. He walked around the body, professional. Then he noticed something. Paint. A faint smear across the victim's coat. Bruce crouched. That's strange. He scanned it. The computer processed the chemical composition. Pigment identification. Industrial coating. Bruce frowned. Industrial? The database continued. Production discontinued. Bruce looked at the body again. You're not making this easy. He scanned the victim's clothing. There was more of the paint. Bruce stood. Dead. Batman, Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 15. The Current. Earth 1, Saga 1, God's Monsters and Mortals, Part 3. The Batcave was quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet. There was a difference. Bruce sat at the workbench beneath the dim lights of the cave, his cowl resting beside him. The armor on his chest was damaged in several places, the result of the fights he'd been through over the past few weeks. Black Mask, KG Beast, Copperhead, Deathstroke, Lady Shiva. The list kept getting longer. Bruce stared at his gloves. He remembered Electrocutioner, Lester Buczynski. The first time they'd fought, Bruce hadn't fully understood how dangerous his electrical equipment could be. The second time had been worse. Lester had nearly killed him. And now Lester was dead. Not killed by Batman. Killed because Black Mask had decided that Lester had become a liability. Bruce picked up one of the gloves. He opened the internal compartment. I should have thought of this sooner. Alfred looked over from the computer station. Thought of what, sir? Bruce turned the glove around. I've been designing the suit to protect me from electrical attacks. Insulation, grounding, conductive layers. Quite sensible. But I never designed it to give electricity back. Alfred looked at him. That sounds considerably less sensible. Bruce almost smiled. Not like Electrocutioner. He pulled up a schematic. I'm adding a setting. This what kind? Bruce adjusted a small control near the wrist. Controlled electrical discharge. Master Bruce? It's not meant to hurt anyone. Alfred raised an eyebrow. That's reassuring. It's a defibrillator. Alfred's expression changed. Bruce continued. If my heart stops, I can use the gloves to shock myself back into rhythm. And if someone else needs it, I can remove the gloves and use the contact plates. Alfred nodded. Very practical. Bruce looked at the glove. Electrocutioner taught me something. That criminals with electrical equipment are dangerous? Bruce looked toward the cave's darkness. That I keep building the suit around what already happened to me. He flexed his fingers. I need to start building it around what might happen next. Alfred smiled faintly. That's called learning, Master Bruce. Bruce put the glove back on. Good. He stood. Because I'm getting tired of learning the hard way. The police communications crackled inside his ear. Bruce stopped. Male Hispanic, approximately 6 feet, possible gang affiliation. Bruce activated the cryptographic sequencer. He listened. The name came through. Antonio Diego. Bruce looked at the computer. The database began pulling information. Antonio Diego, a photograph appeared. Black Mask associate enforcer, smuggling, extortion, assault, weapons trafficking. Bruce studied the image. Spanish enforcer? Alfred looked at the monitor. One of Mr. Sionis's men? Looks like it. Bruce put his cowl on. Then he might know where Sionis is. Antonio Diego never saw Batman coming. He was walking through an alley behind one of Black Mask's businesses. 2 men walked behind him. One carried a handgun. The other carried a shotgun. Batman dropped between them. The first man raised his gun. Batman struck his wrist. The gun fell. A second punch dropped him. The shotgun came up. Batman threw a batarang. The weapon spun out of the man's hands. Batman grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the brick wall. Antonio turned. El Batman! Batman stared at him. You're Antonio Diego. Antonio reached for a knife. Batman caught his wrist. The knife stopped inches from his side. Batman twisted. Antonio grunted. Batman swept his legs out. Antonio hit the ground. He rolled and kicked. Batman blocked it. Antonio got back up. He was strong. Not trained like Shiva. Not skilled like Deathstroke, but experienced. He threw a hard right. Batman slipped it, a left, blocked knee. Batman stepped back. Antonio tried to grab him. Batman caught his arm and drove him into the wall. Antonio gasped. Batman pulled him closer. Where's Black Mask? Antonio spat blood onto the ground. Go to hell. Batman tightened his grip. I've heard that one. Antonio smiled. You think you're frightening? Batman leaned closer. No. Antonio's smile faded. I know I am. Batman released him just enough for Antonio to breathe. Where is Roman? I don't know. Batman looked at him. You work for him. That doesn't mean I know everything. You were at the Royal Hotel. Antonio's eyes shifted. Bruce noticed. There, a reaction. You were there. No, you looked away. Antonio said nothing. Batman leaned closer. You're afraid of Roman. Antonio swallowed. Everybody is. Then tell me where he is. Antonio remained silent. Batman grabbed the front of his coat and pulled him toward the edge of the rooftop. Antonio looked down. Wait, Batman stopped. Antonio breathed heavily. Gotham Merchants Bank. Batman said nothing. Roman owns it. I know. He uses the private floors, meetings, money, weapons, whatever he needs. Batman stared at him. Is he there now? I don't know. Batman let him go. Antonio collapsed against the wall. Batman turned away. You're going to tell the police everything. Antonio laughed. Why? Batman looked over his shoulder. Because if you don't, I'll come back. Antonio stopped laughing. Batman disappeared into the darkness. Gotham was beginning to snow again. Bruce moved across the rooftops. The bank could wait. Something else had caught his attention. Another Deadshot murder. He reached the crime scene after the police had already left. The victim was lying in the snow. One gunshot, clean, precise. Batman crouched. Another professional hit. He activated detective mode. The body lit up. Blood, impact, trajectory, footprints, snow displacement. Batman slowly turned his head. Deadshot was here. He scanned the ground. Nothing. Come on. He moved around the body. No shell casing. He scanned the victim's clothing. Impact entered from the left. Batman looked toward the surrounding buildings. High angle. He looked down at the snow. Something was different. Paint. A small amount of paint had transferred onto the victim's clothing. Batman scanned it. His system produced a result. Pigment composition, obsolete industrial formula. Bruce frowned. Not manufactured anymore. He touched the paint carefully. Why would Deadshot have this on him? He looked toward the rooftop, then the fire escape, then the alley. He wasn't standing here when he fired. Bruce looked back at the victim. He's been somewhere else. He examined the paint again. Something brushed against him. Bruce stood. Equipment, building, vehicle. He scanned the snow. Nothing. He looked around. Deadshot's careful. Bruce's internal voice was quieter now. He doesn't leave evidence. But he did this time. The paint is the mistake. Bruce looked at the empty street. If I can find where this paint is still being used, I can find where he came from. He pulled out a small sample container. He scraped the paint from the victim's clothing. Deadshot thinks he's invisible. Bruce sealed the sample. He's not. The police communications cracked. Batman Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 15. Dead Heat, Earth 1, Saga 1, God's Monsters and Mortals, Part 3. The Batcave was quiet. Too quiet. Bruce stood in front of the training computer with his cowl hanging from one hand. The cave was illuminated only by the monitors scattered around the room. One screen displayed the files on Electrocutioner, Lester Buczynski. His first encounter with Batman had been ugly. His second had been worse. And his final encounter with Batman had ended with Lester being taken alive and eventually dying in prison. Bruce stared at the file. Lester was dangerous because he didn't understand what electricity could do to a human body. He looked down at his gloves. Bruce remembered the fight. The electricity, the pain, the way his own muscles had locked up. He flexed his fingers. I can't keep relying on luck. He walked over to the workbench. A small tool sat beside several pieces of equipment. Bruce picked it up. He opened the inside of one of his gloves. Electrocutioner changed the way I think about electrical attacks. He began modifying the glove. A tiny mechanism was installed beneath the wrist plating. Bruce examined it. This can deliver a controlled electrical pulse. He tested it. A tiny spark jumped between two contacts, low enough to restart a heart. He adjusted the setting. Or incapacitate a muscle group. Another adjustment. Emergency defibrillator. Bruce looked at his glove. If I'm unconscious, Alfred can use it. He stopped. No. He shook his head. Not just Alfred. Bruce looked at the other glove. If someone else is dying, I need to be able to use it on them. He finished the modification. Then he closed his fist. The mechanism disappeared beneath the armor. Bruce looked at the computer. Gotham keeps finding new ways to kill people. His eyes moved toward the crime board. Black Mask, Deadshot, the Holiday Killer, Copperhead, KG Beast, Lady Shiva, Firefly. The list was getting longer, and I'm still trying to keep up. The police scanner suddenly crackled. Bruce turned. Possible assault at a warehouse near the East End. Suspect believed to be affiliated with Black Mask. Bruce immediately reached for his cowl. Of course. He pulled it over his head. The Batman returned. Antonio Diego had been expecting a shipment. He wasn't expecting Batman. The first thug went down before he could draw his gun. Batman stepped out of the darkness. The second man swung a crowbar. Batman caught his wrist. The crowbar struck the floor. Batman drove his elbow into the man's chest. The man collapsed. Antonio Diego turned and ran. Batman fired his grapnel. The cable wrapped around Antonio's ankle. Antonio hit the ground. Batman pulled him backward. He landed beside him. Antonio looked up. Oh, mierda. Batman grabbed him by the collar. You're Antonio Diego. Antonio tried to reach for a knife. Batman caught his wrist. No. He twisted it. Antonio dropped the knife. Batman pulled him into an empty storage room. He slammed him against the wall. Where's Roman? Antonio said nothing. Batman tightened his grip. Black Mask. Antonio laughed nervously. You think I'm afraid of you? Batman stared at him. Yes. Antonio swallowed. Batman released him. Antonio looked confused. Then Batman stepped closer. I don't need to hurt you. He pointed toward the door. I need information. Antonio remained silent. Batman leaned closer. You work for Roman Sionis. Nothing. You collect money for him. Nothing. You move weapons for him. Antonio's eyes shifted. Batman noticed. That one got your attention. Antonio looked away. Batman smiled slightly. You're not as good at lying as you think. Antonio finally spoke. Roman doesn't tell me everything. I didn't ask everything. Batman grabbed a chair and placed it in front of Antonio. Where is he going? Antonio hesitated. You're going to kill me. No. Then why should I talk? Because if you don't, you're going to prison. Antonio laughed. You think prison scares me? No. Batman leaned forward, but Roman does. Antonio's smile disappeared. Batman saw it. There. Antonio looked at him. You don't know what you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Batman crouched in front of him. You're a man working for another man who's willing to let you take the fall. Antonio remained quiet. Batman continued. Roman doesn't care about you. He pays me. He pays you because you're useful. Batman stood. The second you're not useful, you're disposable. Antonio looked toward the floor. Batman waited. Silence. Then Antonio finally said, Gotham Merchants Bank. Batman stopped. Why? Roman owns it. I know. Antonio looked up. He keeps meetings there. Tonight? I think so. You think? Roman doesn't tell me everything. Batman stared at him. Who's meeting him? Antonio shook his head. I don't know. Batman turned toward the door. Antonio called after him. You'll never stop him. Batman stopped. He looked over his shoulder. Maybe. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Antonio sat there. He didn't know if Batman had believed him. He didn't know whether Roman Sionis would survive the night. But he knew one thing. Batman had been inside his head without ever touching him. The snow had gotten heavier. Batman moved across the rooftops. Gotham Merchants Bank was still several blocks away. Then he saw the police lights. He stopped. Another crime scene. Another dead body. Batman looked down. Harvey Bullock and Arnold Flass were standing beside the corpse. Deadshot, Batman muttered. He moved away from the police and dropped into an alley. He waited until the officers left. Then he approached the rooftop. The body was lying in the snow. Batman activated detective mode. The victim's body lit up. Single gunshot. He crouched. Entry wound through the chest. He examined the angle. Shot from above.
I fixed it, finally.
Batman Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 15, The Investigation. Earth 1, Saga 1, Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 3. The Batcave was quiet. Bruce sat at the workbench with his cowl beside him and his gloves laid out in front of him. The events of the past few weeks had left marks on him. Some were physical, some weren't. He picked up one of his gloves and turned it over. The memory came back. Electrocutioner. Lester Buczynski. His electricity. The first time they'd fought, Bruce hadn't understood how dangerous the man's equipment really was. The second time had been worse. And now Lester was dead. Bruce ran his finger across the glove. I should have thought of this sooner. Alfred stood behind him. Thought of what, sir? Bruce looked at the glove. Electrocutioner. Master Bruce, I believe you already have. I'm talking about what his electricity did. Bruce pulled up a schematic on the computer. I've been thinking about what happened when he hit me. Electricity doesn't just hurt. It can interfere with the heart. Alfred understood. You're thinking about a defibrillator. Bruce nodded. Something smaller. He pointed at the glove. If I'm ever hit with enough electricity to stop my heart, I might not have time to get to a hospital. And you're proposing that your gloves revive you? Or someone else? Bruce opened a compartment in the glove. I can put 2 electrical contacts here. He tapped the knuckles. They'll deliver a controlled pulse. Alfred frowned. Sir, I sincerely hope you aren't suggesting you intend to experiment with this on yourself. Bruce looked at him. I'm not. Alfred gave him a look. Bruce sighed. Not intentionally. That is not particularly reassuring. Bruce smiled slightly. He connected 2 wires. The computer displayed a voltage reading. Low enough not to kill someone, high enough to restart a stopped heart if the conditions are right. You're turning your gloves into defibrillators. Emergency defibrillators. Alfred nodded. Very well. Bruce looked at the gloves again. Electrocutioner almost killed me, he paused. But he also taught me something. What? Every criminal I fight leaves something behind. Bruce looked at the crime board. A weapon, a method, a mistake. His eyes moved across the photographs. Even when they're dead. Later that night, Batman moved through Gotham. He wasn't chasing Black Mask yet. Not directly. He was following information. A name had surfaced through one of the criminal channels he'd been monitoring. Antonio Diego. Spanish. Former enforcer. Current Black Mask associate. Batman found him in an abandoned warehouse in the East End. Antonio heard the sound behind him. He turned. Batman was already there. Antonio pulled a pistol. Batman moved. 1 strike knocked the gun away. Antonio swung. Batman ducked. A second strike hit his ribs. Antonio stumbled backward. Who the hell? Batman grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against a support beam. Where's Roman Sionis? Antonio laughed nervously. I don't know. Batman tightened his grip. You answered too quickly. What? You didn't think about it. Batman leaned closer. People who don't know something usually say they don't know. People who do know something try to convince you they don't. Antonio swallowed. I don't know where he is. Try again. I swear. Batman released him. Antonio fell to his knees. Batman crouched. You're an enforcer. Antonio looked at him. You've been moving weapons, money, and people for Black Mask. That's not my business. Then whose business is it? Antonio said nothing. Batman grabbed his jacket. You're gonna tell me. I don't know where Roman is. Batman stared at him. Then he noticed Antonio's watch. A bank logo. Gotham Merchants Bank. Batman scanned it. Interesting. Antonio's face changed. Batman smiled beneath the cowl. There it is. What? You just told me. Antonio's eyes widened. Batman stood. Gotham Merchants Bank. Antonio looked away. Batman grabbed him again. Roman owns the bank. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Batman brought Antonio's face closer. Black Mask doesn't hide money in abandoned warehouses. He hides it where he can control the paperwork. Antonio said nothing. Is he going to be there? Silence. Batman tightened his grip. Is Roman Sionis going to be at Gotham Merchants Bank? Antonio finally whispered. Probably. Batman released him. Antonio dropped to the floor. That's all I know. Batman stared at him. Then you're done. He tied Antonio's hands. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Batman was halfway to Gotham Merchants Bank when his police scanner crackled. He stopped on a rooftop. Possible body and roadway. No identification yet. Batman looked toward the street. A patrol car was already arriving. He changed direction. The body was lying in the middle of the road. A woman, young. She had been shot. Batman landed behind a parked vehicle and waited until the officers had finished examining the scene. Harvey Bullock and Arnold Flass were there. Bullock looked annoyed. Another one, Flass sighed. Looks like it. Any witnesses? No. Bullock looked down the street. Of course not. Eventually, the officers left. Batman waited another minute, then he stepped out. He crouched beside the body. Female. Young adult. He activated detective mode. The world changed. Blood became highlighted, footprints appeared, tire tracks, shell fragments. He scanned the wound. Single gunshot. He looked at the road. No defensive wounds. He examined her hands. Clean. Then he scanned her clothing. Something appeared. Batman paused. Interesting. He recognized the jewelry. A distinctive piece. He'd seen it before. Oswald Cobblepot. Batman frowned. One of Penguin's associates. He looked at the woman's face. Special client. He didn't like the way that sounded. Batman searched her pockets. Nothing. wallet, no identification, no phone. He scanned the ground, nothing. No shell casing. He looked at the street. Deadshot doesn't leave many. Batman examined the bullet wound again. The angle is wrong for a street-level shooter. He looked upward. Buildings surrounded the road. High position. He fired his grapnel. A moment later, he landed on the rooftop. Batman activated detective mode, nothing. He walked slowly. Come on. He scanned. Nothing. You're better than this, Floyd? He searched every corner. Nothing. Then he noticed the snow. One section of the rooftop looked different. Batman crouched. The snow was partially melted. He touched it. Body heat. He looked closer. A faint residue was visible inside the melted area. Batman scanned it. The computer analyzed the sample. Unidentified paint compound. Batman narrowed his eyes. Paint. He took a sample. The computer continued. Manufacture date discontinued. Batman stared at the screen. You're kidding. He looked toward the edge of the roof. Deadshot was lying here. He studied the residue. His body heat melted the snow. Batman scanned the melted section again. That means whatever was on his clothing transferred into the snow. He looked at the sample. Specific paint, he thought. Industrial. He ran the sample through his database. Nothing. Not being manufactured anymore. Batman stood. If I find whoever still has this paint, he looked toward the skyline, I can find where Deadshot has been. A police siren sounded below. Batman looked down. Then another call came through. Fire reported. Batman sighed. Of course. He fired his grapnel. The fire was at an abandoned industrial building. Flames climbed toward the sky. Batman landed on the roof. He immediately recognized the smell. Gasoline. He scanned the building. Firefly. Garfield Lens. Batman entered. The heat was brutal. He pulled his cape over his face and moved through the smoke. Garfield. Nothing. Batman scanned the room. Fuel canisters. Burn marks. Improvised incendiary devices. Batman looked around. You wanted me to find this. A speaker crackled. Firefly's voice came through. You ruined my life. Batman looked up. Garfield. You put me in a cage. You burned people. They deserved it. Batman walked toward the speaker. You're not here. Silence. Batman scanned the room. Of course you're not. A timer started. Batman looked at it. 30 seconds. He immediately moved. He kicked open a door. Smoke filled the hallway. He ran. 20 seconds. Batman jumped over a collapsed beam. 15. He grabbed a burning support cable and pulled it loose. 10. He reached the exit. 5. Batman dove through the doorway. The building exploded behind him. He rolled across the street. He stood. Fire consumed the building. Batman looked at it. Firefly wasn't trying to kill me. He watched the flames. He was reminding me. A message. A warning. Revenge was coming. Batman turned away. Not tonight. Later, Batman changed clothes. Matches, Malone entered a bar. Fedora. Long coat. Different posture. Different voice. Nobody looked twice. The bartender was cleaning a glass. You're new. Matches smiled. Just passing through. He sat down. The bar was decorated for Christmas. Red lights, garland, holiday decorations. A television was playing quietly in the corner. Matches looked around. 3 people were sitting at a table. All 3 had drinks. One took a sip. He suddenly grabbed his throat. Matches watched. The man fell. The other 2 looked confused. Then one of them collapsed. The third stood. What the hell? He took 1 step, then collapsed too. Everyone started screaming. Matches stood. His expression changed. Batman was already working. He moved toward the bodies. The bartender shouted, "Call an ambulance." Matches crouched beside the nearest victim. He examined the glass. Beer. He smelled it. Poison. The bartender stared. What? Matches looked at him. Don't touch anything. He scanned the glasses with a concealed device. No fingerprints. Nothing obvious. He looked at the beer, then at the decorations, then at the calendar behind the bar. December 10th. Batman understood. National Lager Day. The bartender looked confused. What? Matches stood. Nothing. He looked at the victims. 3 people. 3 drinks. 1 holiday. Another piece of the puzzle. Batman left the bar before anyone could ask questions. Outside, he removed the Matches Malone disguise. He stood beneath a streetlight. December 10th. He looked toward the sky. The killer is still following the calendar. He paused. But why? He looked back at the bar. Why these holidays? He started walking. Why these victims? He stopped. Why now? The questions were multiplying, and he still didn't have enough answers. That night, Bruce Wayne stood outside Gotham Elliott Memorial Hospital. He entered quietly. He walked toward Leslie's room. She hadn't woken up. Bruce stood beside her bed. He looked at the machines. Her breathing was steady, but she was still unconscious. Bruce pulled a chair closer. "Hey, Leslie." He sat. "I know you can't hear me." He looked down. "But I'm gonna talk anyway." Silence. "I've been trying to figure out who's doing this." He rubbed his hands together. "I keep finding pieces. Black Friday, Thanksgiving, Back Friday, Special Education Day, Package Protection Day, Wildlife Conservation Day, St. Nicholas Day, Christmas Card Day, and now Lager Day." Bruce looked at Leslie. "It's not random." He paused. "I know that." His voice became quieter. "But I don't know what they're trying to say." Bruce leaned forward. "I'll figure it out." He looked at her. "And I'm going to find whoever did this." He stood. "But first," he looked at Leslie, "I'm going to make sure you wake up." Bruce turned toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. "You're not allowed to leave us." He looked back. "Gotham still needs you." Bruce walked out. The door closed behind him, and somewhere beneath Wayne Manor, Batman's crime board was waiting. Deadshot, Black Mask, Firefly, the Holiday Killer, Penguin, the Assassins, too many enemies, too many mysteries. And Christmas was getting closer. Batman had spent the night chasing criminals, but the questions remained. Who was Deadshot hunting? Where was Black Mask? Why was Firefly back? And most importantly, who was the calendar killer? Bruce didn't have the answers yet, but he was getting closer. And Gotham had a way of rewarding detectives who refused to stop looking. Sometimes with the truth, sometimes with another body, and sometimes with both.